Good morning, everyone. Christo. One of the most common fears that most all of us have experienced at some point in our life is the fear of darkness. I'm sure we can all think back to a time as kids when we were once afraid of the dark. And even though we grow out of this fear, darkness still comes to represent a variety of problems to us as humans. Darkness represents confusion or a lack of knowledge. When we don't know about something, we say we have been left in the dark. Darkness even represents a lack of consciousness. In boxing or the UFC, when someone is knocked unconscious, we say they got their lights turned out. And even though we might not necessarily be afraid of the dark anymore, I'm sure we have all tried walking through our house in the middle of the night with all of the lights off, only to slam into a wall or stub our toe on something we don't see because of the darkness. Ultimately, darkness represents uncertainty. While not bad in its own nature alone, darkness causes problems that we might not have otherwise. The simplest things, like walking around our house, become almost impossible when done in darkness. So too, all of us these days are living in a certain level of darkness. With so much confusion caused by the pandemic, the quarantine, and now the increasing level of confusion surrounding reopening in society, we are all to some extent left in the dark. We cling to scraps of news or bits of information as guides out of this, but really nobody knows what the new normal will look like or when it will come. Now imagine the darkness the blind man in today's gospel was living in. Not only was the man blind, but he was blind from birth, never having any vision at all. I think we can all agree that the thought of being blind or going blind is one of the most terrifying thoughts we can have. The difficulties that blindness would bring to our lives would seem insurmountable. And for this blind man in today's gospel, his difficulties, as a result of his blindness, indeed restricted his entire life. We learn that the blind man was reduced to being a beggar by his blindness, unable to work or function. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar said, "Is not this the man who used to sit and beg?" So like we who are reduced to clinging to scraps of news, the blind man was forced to cling to scraps of money from people passing by. But thankfully, for this man, he encounters Jesus Christ. And just before Jesus heals the blind man living in darkness, we hear Jesus speak about that which is the opposite of darkness. Christ sees the man and speaks about light. Light, the thing that represents hope, the thing that represents solution, the thing that represents a way out. After struggling in thought, we say a light goes off in our head. When we are in a dark tunnel, we are told to focus on the light at the end of the tunnel. Jesus sees this blind man and makes a point about light. Jesus says, "We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night comes when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Jesus Christ is the light of the world, and only light can drive out darkness. Jesus Christ, as the light of the world, heals this man and vanquishes all the darkness that had plagued him all the years since his birth. We all know the relief of flipping on a light switch after spending just a few minutes trying to find our way in a dark room or a dark house. So now imagine the relief the joy, the revitalization that this blind man must have experienced after opening his eyes and being able to see for the first time in his life. Now, we have yet to reach our point of relief. We do not know exactly what the end will look like, and we don't know exactly when it will come. But we know, as Orthodox Christians, that Christ, the light of the world, has defeated death and has been given authority in heaven and on earth. Let his resurrection relieve us from all fear, all anxiety, and all darkness. The reason we sing Christos Anesti is because we are still basking in the light of the resurrection, as we call it. This resurrection proclaims a new existence for humankind, a better existence for humankind, an existence not lived in darkness, not one lived in fear, but an existence filled with light, an existence filled with meaning, an existence filled with hope. Now we're going to rewind a bit to look a little closer at one thing Jesus says before he heals the blind man. Jesus says, "We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night comes when no one can work." We are experiencing a bit of nighttime ourselves these days. Our abilities to do the kind of works we want are limited in all capacities, from careers to schools and to, of course, our churches. This seems frustrating, but even Jesus tells us that there are times when we cannot do all the works we want. We are living through one of those times right now. But there is a daytime coming, a daytime when it will be the right time to resume the good works we are all used to. And until that daytime, let us focus on the good things in our lives, and not the difficulties brought upon us by the darkness and gloom of the pandemic. There is a daytime coming, and let us focus on the light of Jesus Christ and his victory over death to guide us there. Amen.